I Choose Not to Throw by Bryce Young. How to use and not use the information coming out of the NFL Combine this week. It's a television show about prospects and all the skill positions that we in Dynasty Leagues care about will be on the weekend. That and more this week on the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, Bryce Young isn't going to throw. The other quarterbacks notably will. But obviously it's going to be tipping the scales and measuring his height that is going to be the talking point coming for Bryce Young this weekend.
I imagine Bryce Love's not throwing either. That was good. That would be my assumption.
He might be. He might be there.
Maybe we'll have to see. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the key takeaway from the NFL Combine is the performances that you see predict draft pedigree. What they do not predict is performance within draft pedigree, right? So running a 4.24 will make you more likely to be a first-round pick. Choosing the guy that runs a 4.24 instead of the guy that runs a 4.56 among first-rounders, right? That's kind of where you can get yourself in trouble, right? Because there's not really a correlation there once you get in the round of looking at prospects. So that's kind of the way I always look at these things, right? It's going to move the market on where players go, but it doesn't necessarily, once they go there, I don't think it's necessarily predictive of the future after that.
Yeah, I remember one name was Will Fuller. I remember doing a startup draft, getting Will Fuller stock a couple times before the Combine because I was like, this guy's going to run 4.3. And what is that going to do? He ended up being, I believe, wide receiver 1 off the board. There in that stacked little grouping, but up in the top 25, which a lot of people weren't expecting, and who knows, that might happen with Jalen Hyatt or others, that run a time that it's not that it's unexpected, but you actually posted, that number is now in pen with your profile, and that certainly can help. But like you said, it doesn't predict greatness. It doesn't predict that you're going to be a quality dynasty return. It just means you're probably going to go higher in the draft. It just means you're probably going to go higher in a dynasty rookie draft as well. And, one thing about just outliers in general, I've come full circle on the Bryce Young thing, that this whole idea of, well, quarterbacks of his size don't go highly in the draft. Well, he's projected to go there. Like you would say, even if he is 5'10", 187 pounds, he's still going to go pretty high in the draft. And that means he's in pretty rare company about what the NFL thinks about him as a player, and that he's able to be an outlier with his size and frame and still be viewed at, we have this concern, and yet he still, is the favorite to go 101 or QB1 off the board. He's still going to be a bet to go highly, even if he isn't QB1 off the board or, whatever. So I've come around on that in terms of not everything fits, especially a quarterback, in a historical little box, that there's not a lot of data points, not a lot of quarterbacks, that we have sample size go 101, or, you look back even 20 years. Yes, we have a sample size of quarterbacks that go in the first round, but it's still relatively small compared to, say, wide receiver or, some of these others. We get a lot more of this matters pedigree, but for quarterback, a lot of it is round one. It's binary, round one, or I would actually say top half versus the rest, or versus it's a steep curve going downward. So for Bryce Young, I'm coming around to, this whole, he's going to weigh in a certain thing. He's not going to throw. He's not going to work out. And then at his pro day, he might throw a little bit, but he isn't going to play at whatever weight. Like, I think there's so many little storylines here that I think the general consensus, the drumbeat is, well, if you take that out, he's clearly the best at football, of these top quarterbacks. And the only reason we're having a conversation like this is because he's subsized and historically rare frame for the position.
Yes. I don't know. We can go back and look at some other classes, like Kyler Murray, for example. In that class, you could go back and look at some of the Baker stuff where they went with the smaller guy at 1. I think it's become clear that the Baker decision was wrong. I would have made it. That's who I would have taken if I was on the clock when they took him, right? I had Baker futures to go 1. I thought he was the best quarterback in the class. Like, I didn't fault the decision. It didn't turn out right in hindsight. The thing that I wonder with Kyler Murray is, again, Kyler was very good, but there wasn't really competition for him, right? So you have kind of a sample size of like 2 guys that have been really subsized that have gone 1, right? That the Baker one, and then you have, which by the way, the only other right answer in the top 10 was Josh Allen, right? It wasn't, Darnold at 3 or whatever, wherever Rosen went 10 or whatever, and then it was Lamar Jackson way later. Like, it was not, it was the guys that everyone thought were the wrong guys ended up being the right guys in that class. But you go back and you look at Kyler, like, Arizona didn't really have a choice, right? They didn't have the ability to make a choice that was different than the small guy, right? And we've seen him get banged up, right? We've seen him we've seen him have problems, especially once he's gotten banged up. He's performed worse when that has happened. I wonder,
albeit as more of a rushing centric option. For the record, he is a different stylized player than Bryce Young, who prefers to win with his arm, prefers to win with processing. And Kyler Murray, we still have that question. And we've had some mobile quarterbacks that have been subsized, maybe not to that degree, that have also been ones that we haven't seen the progression year over year to get to the point of being a tactician, being one of those fast processors and true masters of the position, like a Drew Brees, let's say.
Yeah. And so I wonder, like, is there still a chance that a team is spooked by it, right? Because it's natural for that to happen, right? And I don't necessarily think it's unreasonable, given what we've kind of seen with these guys have, how they hold up. Like, it's very difficult to be small and play that position, right? And when you've looked at the guys that have really overperformed, it's been this kind of super athletes, and they kind of Josh Allen, right? Jalen Hurts, right? Like, guys you had questions about, but you didn't have questions about their athleticism. And I wonder what the NFL learns from that lesson, right? Do you want to play like a small pocket guy or do you want to take, someone that has a lot of warts, but has all the physical capabilities, and you don't have to worry about it from that front? I mean, it's an interesting question. And I would be surprised if you gave everyone truth serum that there's consensus. It might be that Bryce Young goes 1 and there's not a ton of debate about that, but I'd be surprised if you gave everyone consensus, everyone truth serum and got their actual opinion, that it was a consensus opinion for him to go 1.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually, if I were stacking my probability curve of which players have the highest chance to go QB1 off the board, even if I have Bryce Young at 1, which currently, again, as we sit in this state of Schrodinger's cat, before the combine and before getting more data points, I think Anthony Richardson is number 2, because I understand what the allure is. And we don't have there's questions about CJ Stroud. There's questions about Will Levis. We don't have a clean prospect. You kind of just alluded to, certain classes. Hey, there wasn't really a good pivot here. And we've seen possibilities for all 4 of these guys to be like, why would they be considered QB1, or why would they be considered above other options within that quartet? And then but I mean, we're talking about, and again, I'm not going to double count, but there is freak label here with Anthony Richardson of size and movement. And like you just said, let's look at what has been like just rocket ship productive of changing an NFL franchise, or changing, especially fantasy wise. And I think that's a different discussion of like Dynasty. We care about job security and a lot of things ancillary to when you start, how do you play? Because Justin Fields, easily top 10. We have questions about him long-term as a quarterback. We have questions about him. How many years is he going to be starting? But when he's in a lineup, we're like, well, you feel pretty good about that fantasy wise. Like, what's the actual bottom line points? And so for Anthony Richardson, you can say job security, is he going to progress as a passer, all these types of things. But fantasy wise, and it's maybe more of a redraft or keeper league, very tight concentric window of like what we're looking at for a window. But within that structure, and we had that with Jalen Hurts 2 seasons ago. We had that with Justin Fields this past year. Josh Allen, even before he progressed as a passer, production wise, and just running around making plays, and let's total up the fantasy points, very good. So I think if Anthony Richardson, I mean, that's a pretty alluring fantasy idea, even if you say 5 years from now he's not an NFL starter, but you say, well, how many games did he start? And boy, wasn't that a fun ride? And look what he did for my fantasy team. And I think that's a divide that Dynasty, we always try to, we're constantly blending those two together because it's a multi-year and frankly, a much bigger macro commitment to profiles and players.
Yeah, one thing I'm curious on is, we've seen a couple of these guys come into the NFL and rush better than maybe we thought they would, right? I think Josh Allen's been a better runner than we thought he would be. Daniel Jones, that's been a place where he's probably run better than we expected him to run. I wonder. I mean, Jalen Hurts has been very good as well, but I wonder if there is a, as I say, and I think Fields was actually the other one where we could say he tested well physically, but he wasn't really a runner to the level that he's been a runner, and he wasn't a runner at Ohio State the way he's been a runner in the pros. That has been an expansion of his profile. And I wonder, as we sit here right now, like, there's some stuff like CJ Stroud. Again, I haven't watched a ton of his tape. I haven't done a ton of his study, but I know that a big portion of his rushing in his career came from that game against Georgia. And you sort of saw that he doesn't do a ton of that, but when it mattered, he did it. And I wonder, like, now that we sort of know that he can do it, maybe it's not necessarily his first inclination. Maybe they told him to keep it under wraps, whatever it was, but we know that that's there. Like, I think we undersell how much these guys can do of that when you get into the league, right? I think that's one of the things that's been pretty consistently true. And the other thing too is, like, when you start looking at these drafts, when you start going back and you're looking at the guys, right, it has been the guys that have been physical, that have just been better physically, that have succeeded, right? Go back to 2017. We were at that Senior Bowl. It was like they were discussing nuclear secrets when the UNC coach was there and all the scouts were interviewing him. Like, you couldn't get within 40 yards of it. It was comical. But Mahomes and Watson go way later in that draft, right? You go back to the 2018 draft, which is the Baker year, right? Baker, Darnold, Rosen, those are kind of the less physically gifted quarterbacks. It ends up being Allen and Jackson, who become the big players in that draft. Like, it can, it kind of keeps going as well. I just wonder if, like, kind of you said with Anthony Richardson, if push comes to shove, like, our team's going to just prefer that. Like, I understand the allure of Will Levis. Like, Will Levis couldn't avoid getting sacked if, like, he was paid money to do so. But, like, I understand the big physical nature of his profile. Like, I get why teams like that over a smaller guy. I understand that because it's been consistently true the last, like, half decade where those guys have worked out and the smaller guys haven't.
Yeah. When you were talking about, showing that they can do it and they're just going to be very selective, you're talking about CJ Stroud. The name that I came up with was Justin Herbert. What have we said about Justin Herbert in the NFL? Largely, he could run for a ton of yards, but he chooses to win from the pocket. I choose to throw, the opposite of Bryce Young. So Justin Herbert, we see some of these games, 30 plus rushing yards, 50 plus, like, he can have those moments. He chooses not to. He chooses to win from the pocket. He chooses to win through progression, through big time throws down the field, letting his playmakers work. He's capable. And I was kind of looking back at his rushing profile coming into the NFL. Same sort of thing as Stroud. Like, you say, well, mobile enough, but probably not a guy that's going to lead the position at rushing at any point, or challenge for that. But there's a requisite amount. I think Joe Burrow is another one. He runs enough. You see him run in bigger moments, but you don't see someone where that's the 1A of their game on third down. That's not going to be there, but 2 to 3 times a game, that could be a critical element of their game, and you get to benefit fantasy wise. So I think Stroud could be in that Burrow or Justin Herbert bucket of saying they've shown it enough, but it's not going to be their primary go-to, lightsaber move of weaponry of choice. So I think that's going to be, I always look for, can you show it enough? Like, I personally don't think Bryce Young is going to run a whole lot in the NFL. I think he's going to, when he extends, it's going to be to throw. I think, we've seen from Levis, that's probably going to be a part of his game. Stroud, that could be a part, but this might be limited to, is that like 300-yard upside? Is that like 15 yards per game? it's enough to kind of post within the quarterback position, but by no means is that going to challenge for the 4, 5, 6 actual running quarterbacks that add a tangible element that Anthony Richardson, I believe, will be a part of. So there is a dividing line of the haves, the have-nots, the guys that aren't going to run, the Derek Carrs pretty much. And, there's a handful of NFL starters that they're going to be probably under 100 yards. And then you have guys in the middle where they do enough. So it's kind of 1, 2, 3. What kind of bucket? Tangible, big time upside potential. Then the not really anything. Maybe they get an over the top or sneak touchdown, or Peyton Manning style, surprise everyone with a play action at the goal line. Or you're kind of in the middle where it's going to help you a little bit, but you're just woefully behind the top guys. And I think those 3 buckets, I think Young, Stroud, and Levis are probably going to be in that middle bucket. Young might be in the bottom bucket, but maybe middle-ish. And then Richardson's the only one that has that really, like, Justin Fields type upside, or, Trey Lance, or, these guys that you wouldn't be surprised if they put up 500, 600, 700 plus yards.
Yeah, totally. It's funny. Like, you even go back to the class, like the Jalen Hurts class. But by the way, we should do a dramatic reading of like the 20 guys selected in front of him in that class. Like, my God, what a disaster! Just take Anthony Richardson has like not that many attempts in his career, but I still think the advantage that you get from an NFL team selecting him, it's worth it. Like even if he's not good, like, it's still worth it because like all the other advantages that it gives you, and you just see, like, I think teams consistently underdraft quarterbacks. Like, they consistently do that. Like, right. You see, San Francisco passed on Nick Bosa, right? Or took Nick Bosa and passed on quarterbacks. They've consistently taken defensive linemen and passed on quarterbacks that have been good, right? Like, how different their world might be if they'd taken Mahomes, you know what I mean? Like, but they haven't taken that shot. I just think like you should, like, Carolina consistently passes. Take the guy, like, take him. Like, it was 2 years ago, it was, oh, we're in love with Mac Jones. Last year it was, oh, we're in love with Kenny Pickett. Now they're in love with Anthony. Take somebody. Like, just do it. Like, get off the schneid. I don't know.
Start the clock, take your shot, shoot your shot. And yeah, and I think, and we have this discussion, like, depending on what the haul is, I mean, I still don't get this idea that if the Bears draft a quarterback, it means you have to trade Justin Fields. I don't get all these things. Like, isn't the end game, you get it right, you keep your job, you become a winning franchise. It's an exploitable division immediately. Imagine if the Bears, whether it's Fields or otherwise, had someone that is basically squint and they're the answer, or they're on the path to being the answer this year. What does that look like? I mean, you've got Cousins who may not be there for much longer. Aaron Rodgers gone, complete question mark. And the Lions, as you said, they should be doing the same sort of thing, going for a home run. And that's the division. So I just think this idea that you have to get a first-round pick back for Justin Fields, you have contract control. Look what the 49ers are doing with Trey Lance, right? Rookie contract control. Jordan Love, they have rookie contract control, but they're still doing other things. Why? Because they want to win. And they want to win for as long as possible. They want to win as many seasons as possible. And part of that is just, well, we've got this rookie quarterback, but we've also got these other things we're doing. And all of those things could work in harmony. I mean, 49ers get as deep as they did. Why? They kept going after quarterback, right? They didn't have to go for Brock Purdy. They had Garoppolo still. I mean, like the whole point, maybe the plan was that it was going to be Lance and then Purdy maybe contending to be the QB2. Well, it turns out he was QB3 and they needed every single guy. And they lost QB3, and all of a sudden that's why they couldn't push for the Super Bowl ultimately. Like, I just think, like, if Fields is going to have hurt feelings because you draft a quarterback highly, how about you just beat him out for the job? It might actually motivate him. That might actually be a good thing. He's freaking in the facility, and, it's not that he wasn't dedicated before, but he wants to shove that 101 pick right over there into the closet. Like it's a high school hallway locker situation. Be like, you are never getting out of there. Like, I am the captain now. Like, what did the drafting of Rodgers do to Favre? What did the drafting of Love do to Rodgers? Like, that's been one of the most successful quarterback franchises over 3+ decades. Because why? They drafted first-round quarterbacks when they didn't need to. Right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here? Why are we having this conversation? You only have to have one. If you have two guys, you don't have any. No, if you have two guys and one of them is the right answer, It doesn't matter. You can have 4 quarterbacks. You could draft quarterback 4 times in this draft. And as long as one of them hits, no one's going to remember the other ones. No one.
You got the right
God,
answer.
so annoying. Yeah. So this idea that you have to cash everybody else in. 49ers got to the, like, within 3 quarters of the Super Bowl, and they were down to QB4. So how many do you need? All of them, Jordan. You need every single quarterback you can possibly get your hands on, and it still may not be enough because you might play Josh Johnson again. Like,
Right.
that's really the thing. Let me say one other thing about the combine coming up. And I know we went off to quarterback, which we typically do, but I will say this. One of the biggest things I've come around on, I used to, and let's say 5+ years ago, I reacted so strongly to these, especially the quote unquote bad or underperforming wide receiver workout, which I think is something I have auto corrected to a high degree, that a productive wide receiver that doesn't completely bomb their workout and still goes high enough in the NFL draft is someone to not write off your board. And so this idea, like, we're seeing more and more with the NFL, wide receivers come in different shapes and sizes. And this idea that you got to gravitate towards the 6'3" guys. And again, we have 1 or 2 of those guys that are going to go in the top 100. Quentin Johnson being one of the biggest, could be wide receiver 1 off the board. But there's a lot of guys that are 6 foot, 5'11", 5'10", sub-sized. And that may put you into a certain usage bucket in general in the NFL, which we may not like. But we are seeing more guys get more targets that are, just a different look. And if they were productive in college, they check some of the boxes you're looking for. Don't write them off because some guy that's 184 pounds ran a 4.50, and you're like, well, they have to run 4.35 or else I'm not going to care about them. So that is one thing that I've been more and more open to, is just the wide receiver. You want productive guys, you want guys with pedigree, and a workout isn't necessarily going to take them off an NFL draft board from the first 2 or 3 rounds. And it really shouldn't take them off of our board either.
Yeah, I love that. By the way, as you were doing this, I just went back and I looked, guys that since 2017, quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round on rookie deals, 80% of them have gone to the playoffs. That actually includes guys that have straight out busted or not played or not impacted it at all. Jordan Love is included in that. Dwayne Haskins, RIP. Lance, who has done really nothing to contribute to that. Like, it's wild how much of an advantage it is. And those are all coming from teams. A lot of those teams picked in the top 4 or 5 picks of the draft. Like, it's just wild how far, how big of an edge that has been.
Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 143, the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And want to finish out segment 1 here with, I put together a top 5 list and wanted to get Jordan's comments on this. But, we all have different parts of our calendar for Dynasty teams and GMs. And I put together 1 through 5 of just kind of what gets me excited, if this of the 12-month calendar is occurring. So I put number 5, and this might be number 1 for a lot of people, but I put the December and January playoffs. Now we have January being the fantasy dynasty championship games a lot of times, but it's also just that shift to watching the NFL in a different way because our dynasty teams are also over. So that nice little stretch run of 4 or 5 weeks of fantasy championships plus transitioning to NFL playoffs. I put that at number 5. Number 4, get totally geeky, but when the final seasonal data, I only go through week 17. I don't include week 18, but doing that data scrubbing, analysis, projections forward, it's a busy time period for me. It's a lot of work, but I just get super geeky. So that's number 4 for me, of just turning the page over officially to the off season for a lot of the data and a lot of the analysis that is done from the content producer side. Number 3, September and the season start. Like, that could be week 1, it could be week 1, week 2 kind of stuff, but everything's new. We spend 8 months kind of looking ahead to the next meaningful game for us. We finally start getting them, and things are different. A lot of things you're not expecting positively or negatively, and you just tape open your eyes. And for like a couple of weeks, you're just calibrating a slippery slope and just trying to get your footing there. Number 2, I'm going to say the gauntlet of 2 or 3 weeks where you have a ton of your post NFL draft rookie drafts. Like, you have so many things going on at once. If you have 20 leagues, 15 of them are probably during those 2 weeks at some point starting. And it's just a lot of fun of, I got 108 here, I got 106 there. Like, you're trying to move and shake with trades and where's the hot value points, moving up, trading out, all these types of things. And the number 1 for me, I don't get many of these data points, but to me, it's the most fun experience where it's March or it's April and it's the pre-NFL draft and you get the rookie Devy draft combo. I don't have many. I have one or two, but man, doing the pre-NFL draft bets on rookies that are still out there, mixing in the Devy. Obviously, you've already got combine and some information, but not all the information. So that would be probably the coolest when I get to put together my boards and go through some of those drafts. What are your thoughts? Is anything too high, too low? If you were making your own top 5, Jordan.
I like what you said about the combined rookie Devy. Like he can make some nice solid bets there. Just by sort of arbitraging, you don't even necessarily need to know anything. You can just arbitrage some of the calendar stuff with some ADP or some mock draft stuff in NFL terms with ADP and dynasty terms and make an edge there. Like that doesn't even require you to necessarily be right on players. So I love that angle. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like I think it's funny that December and January, like that playoff window, I spend a lot of energy there, and I'm not sure I necessarily enjoy the experience. Like, so I don't even know where to put it. Like, it's not like would I consider the playoffs fun? No, I don't necessarily think I have the most fun during that time. It's like a Bills game. Like, do I enjoy watching the Bills play? I don't. Like, it's usually not fun for me. But yeah, so it does make the list. And I think a lot of people, I think for you, maybe for different reasons, it's lower. I think a lot of people don't really, look forward to all the other stuff, the bikini season time. Yeah.
Where do you stand on the deluge of rookie drafts post NFL draft? Would you rather have them spread out like one every 3 days? Would you like that you probably have a chunk that start at certain points in time? Would you rather the spread out and you focus on one at a time to span 2 months, or do you kind of like that you have a few going on in different little buckets?
I like my drafts to take place like 10 days after the NFL draft. I can get a look at all the data. It's coming in other drafts. I can sort of understand the trades that are happening. I can sort of keep those in my mind, and then I just get in a rhythm. Right. I just get in a rhythm of doing, I see the same patterns. Like I kind of like it condensed like that, where I get a little bit of time to think about it, a little bit of time to process it. And then it's all sort of concentrated in the same quick window.
Yeah. Fortunately, I don't have a lot. I don't have a lot that start like can you believe, Jordan, some of the people that it's like, it starts on Saturday, like literally this Saturday while day 3 is going on. I still think Monday, like I'm still kind of reeling. I do a lot of work, in content for others, as opposed to like preparing my own drafts. And here I got 106. What am I doing? Like, so I really like, just like you, like if you can give me a solid week of kind of seeing others, answering questions, seeing some trades, and then like really having my own stuff refined through actually what's happening. And then you get me into a bunch of drafts. Yeah, that's definitely the optimal timing, which I think there are some that it's usually about a week after it's safe leagues. And then I think there's a couple other big boxes that pretty much, early to mid-May, that's kind of the sweet spot for when they annually start.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Want to remind you about Dynasty Trades of this week. So FFPC, we were just talking before the show, time to renew your leagues. As we're recording this live, just a couple hours before that deadline. But we have another month before you have that cut down. We talk about it all the time. That's one of the big features of FFPC. It's not deeper rosters. You cut down to 14 positional players. And so a lot of these trades, we had a couple tonight on this show that are going to be, how do you have the roster spots? How are you looking to allocate them? Player 10 through 14, let's say, with do you want to open it up? Do you want to trade for a pick? Do you want to trade that pick for a player that maybe upgrades your keeper? So those are key questions for FFPC. And we're going to start out this week. Drake London on the move, along with 210 for Devontae Adams, Brandon Cooks, 204 this year, and then a second and fourth the following year. So obviously you take on an additional roster spot. It would be viewed as more of a win now move, if you will, going to Devontae Adams. What are your thoughts between getting this kind of return for Drake London?
You're paying Brandon Cooks plus for Drake London. Excuse me, you're paying you are paying Brandon Cooks plus, right, but you're also paying Devontae Adams plus for Drake London, which seems like a lot. I understand the consolidation angle. They're very close in terms of, at fantasy calc, they're a couple people away. I don't know if I necessarily love the idea of paying Davante Adams plus for Drake London as I sit here
Well,
right now.
we always say, how do you win, right? Because basically London has to turn into some sort of radius of Davante Adams for this,
Mhm.
for that side to win. Davante Adams just needs to have an, like, FFPC and shallow. Isn't that like even a more validating format to say, if a guy's a stud, I don't care if they're on a 1 to 2 year window, even if you think they are or whatever, that alone, one big year, one strong year is worth a lot in a shallow format because everyone else kind of blends in. If Drake London is wide receiver 20 this year and Davante Adams is wide receiver 5, I mean, give you all the years you want, right? I mean, that's pretty darn important in a shallow format where a lot of things can happen.
Yeah, I think people are going to get spooked on Davante Adams. Like, this is a good reminder to go, hit that up if they don't, especially if they don't land Rodgers, right? I think that is certainly a place that you need to go explore on, basically a high value innings eater, right? I think that's a really good spot to look for him. And they'll figure it out. Like, they'll figure out a quarterback situation. They're not going to start. I mean, maybe they start Jared Stidham, but that didn't prove to be awful last year either. So we'll see. But I just, like, I really like Drake London. Of the young wide receivers, like, him and Olave are my two favorites. I really like Drake London. I just can't do a construct like this.
Right. Especially if you're a team with any hopes, and again, checks watch, February trending to March, you should have hopes that you're going to be
Yes.
you're winning and performing well. So Davante Adams is a good part of that. He's a ball winner at a position where you say, how short is that alpha list? He's unequivocally, for years we've seen him on that alpha list. And so that's not likely to change. Until we see absolute clarified signs that he is not that guy, assume he's that guy is kind of the thinking. And the hope is Drake London gets to be that guy. But even if it, by 2024, London becomes that guy, Adams might have such a clear advantage. And Cook's probably, within your top, let's say you're keeping a nice tight 4 at wide receiver, Cooks is probably on that list. And you've got the pick upgrade. You got a second next year, and second can get you places. You can trade those picks, for something that helps you. Oh, I'm struggling at tight end. You can trade 204 for a quality veteran that can get you started at that position. That can help you, in the veteran marketplace. The other FFPC one this week is Brian Robinson and 203 for a 24 first. So it's tough. We're not in the environment you can typically get an early second traded straight up for a future first. We mention every time with FFPC trades that future firsts are truly random. It's funny, like the teams that just barely missed the playoffs, those are the ones that can win a couple games in the Consolation Bowl and end up with 101. The worst team in the league, may not have the best chance to get 101. That's kind of how that consolation bracket works for deciding your draft pick slot. So do you think this is an overpay for a future first, or Brian Robinson is not one that's going to make that big of a deal?
Don't trade a future first unless you're getting back a top 30 asset. Brian Robinson's not a top 30 asset. Take the future first.
And that still applies to FFPC as well for you.
100%. Yes.
Okay. So this is one where you go, it's like, well, I'd like to trade non-criticals for something that could be critical. And if that's an early second, I'm going to add probably your running back. At best, it's probably your running back 2. It could be your running back 3 or 4. And Robinson doesn't really have that profile where you're like, well, he's going to catch 70 balls. He's still firmly in a committee with Antonio Gibson. And Robinson doesn't really profile as a guy that is going to kill you in this deal if you lose him.
Yes.
Because even if he has a couple solid seasons, it's probably not going to be big enough, strong enough, high upside enough to be like, oh my God, this ended up at 110 next year. I took my shot. It didn't work out. And I really regret trading Robinson. It doesn't feel like that.
Do you think this is, when we hang up tonight on the show, do you think this is something I should spend the rest of my evening working on? Because I'm pretty sure I'm going to do it.
Brian Robinson where was he going again in rookie drafts a year ago?
I mean, late, like 206 beyond.
Yeah. So 2 seconds for a future first, and you take your shot. And again, this has changed your FFPC team potential if it 100%. Turns early.
Yes.
Even though it's one quarterback, I mean, still getting on the early side and getting someone with you can get a round 1 running back. Certainly you're going to look at a round 1 wide receiver, but you're also going to get liquidity to be able to trade that for a lot more variety than Brian Robinson, a very specific very specific. So you've profited, and you use that profit to now get even more profit, which I like. All right, last one, we got stock 12-team PPR, one quarterback. This is a big boy deal. We've got Chris Olave. You already mentioned him, fan, with Kenneth Walker and 111 for AJ Brown, Elijah Moore, looking around in this deal like John Travolta. What am I doing here? And 102. So you get a pretty big pickup grade, but you're moving Olave and Walker for Brown and Moore.
So, I mean, to me, the way that I would look at this deal is I think AJ Brown is the best receiver in the deal. Walker's the only running back. So I think there's a couple of ways you could look at this. I think you could say, AJ Brown and Walker, they're close enough, set them aside. You take Olave over 102, and you're definitely taking 111 over Elijah Moore. Boom. That side wins. I think the other way that you could kind of look at this is say, all right, like Olave and AJ Brown are pretty close in terms of receivers. Like AJ Brown's the better player, but you're absolutely 100% you should take Kenneth Walker over the 102. Like there's no doubt about that as you sit here right now that you should do that, especially in a non-premium format. You 100% take the guy like Kenneth Walker, who is actually proven it. Sorry, Ken Walker. John Schneider said today that he likes Ken Walker, and he gets angry when people call him Kenneth. If I was the GM of the Seattle Seahawks, I would not tell people that because I would want Ken Walker to run more angrily, but I will work on that so I don't offend him. I don't want to be on the wrong side of his anger. And then again, it's 111 for Elijah Moore. I think this is a smashing success for the Olave side. Again, I love Olave. I think he's probably undervalued, but I think any way you sort of slice it, it wins for Olave's side.
Right. The thing I would bring up is AJ Brown, such a dominant, the gravity of this deal revolves around him. And I would say no. I would say that, the fact that there is still a question about how many targets will he get. There's highly competitive and talented targets around him there with the Eagles. So to say that it's a blowout and it's AJ Brown, greater sign, Chris Olave, I wouldn't make that statement. Mm-hmm. And at minimum with 102, let's say it's Jahmyr Gibbs. Let's say it's wide receiver 1. But even if it's Gibbs and he gets like late first pedigree, Ken Walker is a 21-year-old rookie that posted already and showed some good things, and he's already on a success track. And you should take that first over the 102. And then again, Elijah Moore shouldn't even be there. Like, hopefully that was just someone throwing him in. And frankly, there probably was a better throw in that they could have got in that deal. And if that was, again, chosen by the Brown side, I would say good on you, because Elijah Moore took a massive step back. It's not really a profile you should prioritize. And it's probably one that's going to keep you sucked in and keep your skin in the game of saying, oh, Elijah Moore is going to become something. He blends into the backdrop of wide receiver landscape. So I think shedding that for that side is a good idea. The fact that, like, to me, it feels more fair if 111's not in there. Like, I think we keep alluding to the fact that 111 feels like the thing that stands out a lot in this deal of saying like getting that is a huge boon from that side. Now, I will say this, if that's 101, I might be in the minority, but I would take that side. So I would take the AJ Brown side if that was 101.
Yeah, that's a different question, right? Because then you're kind of reevaluating. It's Kenneth Walker versus Bijan Robinson. How do you feel about that, right? That's the question that you're then asking yourself, which I think is a different question.
Right. Because at least how it sits right now, we are in a class, especially with no super flex here, that it feels like that Ezekiel Elliott class in terms of there's a drop. There's a perceived / real drop from 101 to kind of everybody else. Everybody else is fighting for 102 through X. But 101, I mean, we typically, it's not every year that you have this established January 1, here's what 101 looks like. And, February 1, March 1, April 1, May 1. Like, we're likely to have that same answer every single month of what's going to happen, and who's going there. I think we're going to have a pretty sustained drumbeat in that regard.
Yes, we will. Before we get to quotes from the Shark Bowl, I do want to preview. We talked about this in prior shows. My Dynasty team building guide is out for this year. You can use promo code FBG at analyticsdynasty.com/product/guide, right? That'll get you 10% off. There'll be a link in the show notes as well. I put it in the comments to the video, so you can go check that out. Good turnout so far on folks getting that. Thank you for supporting the show and supporting our work over there. This is the 5th edition, right? It has coverage for everything, every dynasty decision process you'd want to go through. I have it up. I'll do 10 minutes of dynasty questions, and I'll have the sheet up, and I'll literally just start working off of it in terms of giving people the responses. I have a cheat sheet, a 1-page cheat sheet of many pages of this book, a 1-page cheat sheet that sort of breaks everything down into just some simple rules to follow, and I can answer almost all of the questions off the sheet. And it's better in terms of hitting on players, avoiding misses, right? The type of constructs to make. People always ask me, what's the thing that I should be doing in terms of rebuilding my team? I have that all laid out for you. How do I fix running back? How do I fix wide receiver? How should I think about the quarterback position? It's all there, right? I have all those things. Some things you talked about, the calendar, have all that, like different edges to pick up in terms of the calendar stuff. It's all there. It's different than you'll probably read anywhere else. So go ahead and check it out, and check out the comment. 10% off uses the promo code Footballguy or FBG for 10% off for Footballguys subscribers.
Yeah, and I would say every offseason strive to improve, and that can be on the not the theory side, but that can improve beyond like, well, I'm getting into my league and I'm making a bunch of trades, I'm moving and shaking, I'm trying to have a better rookie draft. Like those are very direct things, but I would say just be a learning machine, and that could be like I always say, like I'll record similar shows, in the off season. There might be 50 shows that are the same every single off season. But as as a consumer, someone that if you read something, you listen to something, you might read the same book 3 times. You might listen to the same podcast 2 or 3 times. You're going to hear something different or read something different, take something away from it. And so I always say, if you give someone 10 things, if you actually absorb this time one thing, then that's good. That's great. Next time you might absorb something, you might not be ready to hear or put into practice something. So that's why the off season, become a learner, become someone that's going to like, what's a weak spot for you? Where's a position, a type of your dynasty toolbox that you are striving to improve, or be open and receptive to, here's a bunch of different stuff. What's something I could put into action now? And I just thinking having, as a dynasty GM, having that mindset is really a key one, because before you know it, you're going to get into the throes of rookie drafts. Maybe you took a couple months off. Before you know it, it's May. You're doing your drafts, and you're doing the same stuff you did before. And the thing I like to say is look back at yourself 1 to 2 years ago and say, I was a dum-dum. Like, and again, whatever level you are, it's not some grading scale, but just be better. Be better this year than you were a few years ago. And all of a sudden you're on a better track than a lot of your league mates that, again, they're going to wake up from their slumber. Maybe they made a trade over the first 4 months of the offseason. They're going to rookie draft, and then they're going to go to a slumber again, and they're going to hope to win this year. But if you're not doing anything to improve and learn, I think it becomes a lot more random than prescribed.
Definitely.
All right, quotes from the Football Guys Dynasty Forum closing out this week. It might just be my personal experience, but trading for old guys never seemed to work out for me.
I mean, it depends the cost that you're paying the old guys you're talking about, right? That's a sliding scale. Again, we talked about the concept of innings eaters. Maybe we can make that a show topic at some point. Like, I love those guys because they serve a great sort of identifiable purpose. And
the Max Scherzers of the world. I'm going out there and I'm pitching at least 7.
Right. Jamie Moyer. Like, I know exactly what I'm going to get. Like year over
Tom
year
Glavine,
over year.
Drag me off the round.
Right. And so I love those guys. It's a huge advantage. And if you build around them, like they're the type of veterans. If you're building around bad veterans, if you're building around, it's all the profiles that you do, right? The right veterans are typically underpriced, but you have to make sure you're going after the right ones.
Yep. And actually, sidebar, we're going to talk a non-sport, but a non-football sport is, what do you think about the pitch clock? Are you actually going to watch some games?
I'll check it out. I was watching a little bit. There was some controversy or some hubbub to do with, I don't know if it was I don't know, understand the actual rules. I haven't paid that much attention, but it looks like someone advanced. There's bases loaded. Something crazy happened. I'm in it for the chaos, man. Just give me the chaos. That's why I like
almost
March
like a balk. I mean,
chaos.
Someone's going to score from third base if
yes, I'm in.
It's going to decide games here potentially.
Yes.
I couldn't believe the timing of it. Like, they're staying near the box. They're staying in there. The pitcher is like ready to throw. It's complete divergent optics from what I remember. I mean, like I know Greg Maddux, and I was a big Braves fan of like coming home watching TBS, years ago when I was a kid. But those games were quick. They had 3 or 4 quality starters. They forced contact. They weren't going for 11 strikeouts a game, and they got bats on balls, and that game was typically over before 3 hours of, including commercials and all of that for the TV coverage. And I don't know. It's tough to get. I mean, I get the postseason games, if they go on forever and they're 4.5 hours and they become just huge, massive experiences. But man, like that's a tough slog in May, June, and July. All right. This is what I think happens in these bad trades that are posted here. Someone is trading to a friend or themselves. So what do you think is like when you see quote unquote like lopsided deals? And I think a lot of people have this view of like, well, they don't happen in my league. What's your reaction to that?
You haven't tried. Again, I don't think it's that. By the way, some people have criticized like the approach of like just trade for elite players, and they say like you're just trying to stick it to people. No, I'm not. I'm just trying to let people do what they already want to do, which is to give up elite
Best
players
player in
for
the deal.
depth.
Yeah.
Right. Like they want depth because that makes people feel comfortable. Whereas I am willing to lean directly into elite players because I think it's just a total philosophical difference. I think that those things exist. So I do think that we can make trades that look weird to people. And I think we can win them. Right. But we're sort of aiming at it differently. Right. So I think if you see some things, you're like, what the heck was that person thinking? Your response shouldn't be to be mad about it. Your response should be to be mad at yourself about it because you weren't sort of there to offer them what they wanted in their time of insecurity that they then needed to make a bad deal to fix, right? I mean, those are the things that I tend to think about. I see trades for quarterbacks all the time. I had a subscriber tell me, if you ever see an elite quarterback traded to someone other than you, it's your own fault. And I believe that, right? Like you should be checking in on these guys all the time. And checking in on elite players. When players get depressed, like if those players get traded and they're not to you, that's your fault because you weren't there to sort of knock on that door and ask them. So if you see a lopsided trade, like it's especially for a player that is of consequence and that you're in on, like that's a missed opportunity that you should have been there to exploit.
Right. And the idea of, someone being offended by an offer. So the wide spectrum of outcomes with a response could be that was accepted. It was an accepted deal. And all of a sudden now you have the best asset, best player in the deal when you gave up 2, 3, 4 things. So that's one outcome on one side. And then the far side of the other end, you have the, why are you sending me this junk? And like, I would never trade this player for that, and send me a real offer and then you'll get a real response or something of that ilk as a response. So you have those two divergent outcomes. And again, the risk of getting one gives the potential to get the other. And I keep saying it, but it would be no fun if everyone had the same player values or same idea about building rosters. That's what makes fantasy fun. That makes Dynasty fun. Heck, let's go to a whole different stratosphere. You go to board games or others, or playing a sport or whatever. Everyone's going to have a different idea. How do I play? What's the strategy? What should I be doing? I mean, we have a bunch of different opinions on how to use challenges or timeouts, or, there's just that's what makes it fun. What makes it fun is everyone has a different idea for strategy. So,
yes.
Anyway, so I think it's the same with dynasty trading, different player value, different, like some people really look forward, as you just said, trading one player for 3, quote unquote, building depth. Some people are like, give me the best player and I'll figure out the rest. So those two things converge, and that's how those deals actually happen.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of things converging, where do you want to think that Olave AJ Brown deal pulls? I put it out on Twitter. Where do you think the market
early
is
results? Okay, let's see. Early results.
Get your Steve Kornacki going here.
Yeah, sure. All right. So I'm gonna say 57% Olave.
53% Brown.
Yeah.
Which here's the thing I'll say about that. Yeah. I very much enjoy trades where I'm pretty firmly convicted on the side that I'm on and I'm in the minority. Like,
And it's a
that's kind of
losing
what I
one.
know
Yeah.
that I'm doing.
Oh
That's
yeah.
kind of, I know when I'm doing it right.
It's your market versus the market. That's always what I
Yes.
say. When you have the sliders one direction versus going the other. I really think the pull is AJ Brown pulls a lot of weight. Like he's been,
He does.
and I know you talked about efficiency. You said, this big upside absolutely could occur. And we're seeing more upside, with this Eagles offense. But even before that, it was pretty quizzical. Like he was going in top 4, top 5, top 6 dynasty wide receiver when track record to that point, he really didn't have a great argument to do so. And so it's no surprise that now there's people that, again, we didn't frame it and we didn't narrate it that way, but they would say AJ Brown 102, like those are 2 of the 3 best assets in the deal without question. Like there's plenty of people, and that's probably why you're getting greater than 50% on that side.
Yes, agreed.
All right, last one. This is a quick one. DK Metcalf and Mark Andrews are kind of a wash in FFPC.
No, they're not. One of them is extremely irreplaceable, right? One of them has elite ceiling, the other one doesn't. I actually think when you look at the draft range, like you start tiering players and you put DK Metcalf in a tier and you address that with both kind of production, cost, and age. Like it's the ultimate avoid profile, right? It's mid-20s. It's guys that don't have wide receiver in their range of outcomes, and it's guys that are insulated for basically kind of like middling to like wide receiver 2 to like low, to high end, to basically, it's 10 through, 20 in terms of production.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, well, what am I like, that's a stupid thing to protect for. Like it's like, whereas like you'd much rather take a swing at a guy like Cooper Kupp in that range, in my opinion, because you can have wide receiver 1 out of that, or like take a swing at Olave or Drake London instead of taking a swing at those guys. Like take a big swing one way or
upward
another.
latitude of their career arc, right?
Yes, I think a DK Metcalf swing sort of in that range is a coward's pick. Like that's the coward's way out, in my opinion, just because I don't think it's going to make a big difference. Where
Building
like
depth.
you'd much rather Andrews is going to, like, if Andrews hits, Andrews is of consequence. If DK Metcalf hits, like it's like a part of a solution, but it's not the reason that you're winning. You know what I mean? I don't like to make those bets.
Yeah, the final thought I would say is FFPC, you would love to consolidate. And when Mark Andrews is the guy that just you're putting him in, you get the premium. And again, if you happen to hit on another stud tight end, you can start both of them. And wide receiver, like you were saying, I mean, DK Metcalf, you can use him as a proxy for, I'd like to have, 2 or 3 quality wide receivers, but they don't have to be named DK Metcalf. If you say, well, I don't want Mark Andrews, the list gets really short really fast at tight end on what actually matters there, what you can use that consolidation. I'm not searching for a tight end, subset of players that fit into that bucket. So it could also, DK Metcalf doesn't save you a roster spot. Mark Andrews could save you a roster spot if you're just in the weeds looking for tight end versus looking for wide receiver. And the other thing I would say is, what's more easy to fix? And you kind of alluded to it. If his range of outcomes is wide receiver 8 through 24 for DK Metcalf, but is Mark Andrews tight end 1 through 3 a lot more difficult to find and fix and acquire in a future deal of any kind?
Absolutely.
All right. In this episode, we discussed a bevy of dynasty trading, a little bit on FFPC, about process. I had a big deal in there with Chris Olave that led to some good discussion, as well as team direction and what you're hoping for guys like Devontae Adams versus Drake London, who we do really like quite a bit. You heard about Jordan with his Analytics of Dynasty offering there. Please go to the show notes that is applicable to the show as well. And then also, I discussed favorite time periods of the Dynasty calendar, a little bit about the combine, of course, centering at the quarterback position, critical year, and some critical profiles that are going to be finalized over the next couple of months for the NFL, and then ultimately trickling down to our Dynasty franchises. I'm Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. Until next time, good luck in your Dynasty leagues.